Hello everyone and welcome to Maple Leaf Reviews. I'm Jeffrey.
And I'm David.
And today we're going to be doing a review of Feudum. We also did a before and after for this game, which you can go down to the description and watch that on YouTube as well.
That's right. So let's just jump into this one because it's going to be a fairly lengthy discussion, I think.
I think so.
about the game. So Feudum, I'm going to give a quick overview of what this game is all about. So we are basically in Queen Anne or King Daniel's dominion. I'm not really sure which, but this dominion is controlled by 6 different guilds, as well as there's 6 different landscapes, I believe, and a bunch of different locations that are out there. And so your object is to go about and exert influence within these guilds and do different things within the guilds that are going to earn you victory points, or in this game they're called veneration points, or VPs. We'll call them VPs. See what they did there. And so you're going to do all of this, and the way you're going to do it is you're going to actually be given a set of cards. So there are 11 cards to be exact, and every player will be given the same exact set of cards. And these cards control the actions you can take each round. In the beginning of each round, each player will choose 4 of these actions simultaneously, 4 of these cards, simultaneously, and then they'll play them in turn order to take the action that's on the card. So the action cards as well usually have multiple purposes to them. There's the main action as well. Sometimes
you might get
a bonus action, or sometimes it's an or action. So you have lots to choose from there. And you also have multi-purpose cards, like I mentioned, and you'll have multi-purpose resources throughout the game that you'll be able to collect. And again, all the while you're trying to basically build your system in such a way that you're getting more points than the next.
And it's a very whimsical setting as well. Whimsical monsters, whimsical artwork and landscapes. Like the mountains are just like this pointy peak.
Well, they remind me of a Madonna video way back then with different devices she was wearing. But anyhow, well, that's a good point. Why don't we just jump right into the presentation of the game?
Let's jump into the presentation. Yeah. So I know you weren't a huge fan of the artwork straight off the bat.
I was not.
But me, I found it quite charming. It was different. It was kind of like a breath of fresh air. Like I really enjoyed the artwork and presentation in the game.
Well, I think I mentioned this in our before and after. As we played the first game, it grew on me, and I began to enjoy it as well. But the problem I also find with some of the artwork is that although it looks really cool as a picture, there's some parts of it that actually take away from the actual gameplay itself. So in particular, just off the top of my head, when you're transporting yourself around, you can use different vehicles. You can either go by flight, which is these little tiny birds that are drawn on there. You can go underwater.
Little bubbles.
And then you can go on water in the boats, and there's these little waves. And sometimes the bubbles and the waves correspond with each other, and sometimes they don't. So I found that sometimes that was a little tricky to follow.
Yeah. I also found the color choice between the yellow and the green actually came into play. You thought you had a food.
I thought I had food, and it was sulfur. Oh, yeah.
So you go to play, and you're like, oh, yeah, I get put 3 food on here. I'll take that. It's like, no, actually, that's yellow.
And playing with this guy, there's no mulligans, not even for a mistake like that. Yeah, so I was really quite, that was a good point. And also I found that the starting spaces, there's 6 starting locations, and then when you put the locations on top of them, they're identified on the board as these pink or purple pink rings. And when you put the token on top of them, it's very difficult to see, which actually does affect gameplay because it's the alchemists, I believe, that you can add a pawn to any starting location. Sometimes you go, well, where is that? Especially as the board starts filling up with resources and other people's pawns.
Yeah. The only other thing with the kind of the artwork presentation and affecting gameplay was the spaces where you put the stuff in the merchant guild. You actually cover up the cost.
Yeah, that's right.
So we just played with them above or below the cost so you could see it rather than being like, okay, I want to buy food. How much is that? And you move it back. But other than that, there's a few hiccups in how it integrates with the gameplay. But I like the aesthetic of the artwork.
The aesthetic is nice. And one more thing that actually affected some gameplay. The board is long. It's a big board, and there's 3 guilds on one side and 3 guilds on the other side. And each guild, to get influence in the guild, you need a variety of things. But one thing you can piggyback on top of is your type of landscape that you have. And my first play, sometimes I had a hard time seeing which landscape I required for one of the guilds.
Whether you have a farm or an outpost a city.
And because the picture aperture was so small, and sometimes it was way on the other side. So that was another thing that affected, game. I'll say that's what affected my gameplay.
Yeah.
But you taught me the game, and I also read the rules prior, but you did the bulk of the teaching.
Yep.
So why don't you walk us through the rule book?
So the rule book was pretty good. In the before I mentioned I didn't know what I wanted to do in the game after reading the rule book, but I think it explained the rules pretty well. The one there was a couple hiccups, most notably for me was the crud barrel production.
Right.
I didn't understand how it worked until after 2 plays, and then going to BGG, and I was like, oh, that's what they mean by it being limited to not building the 3rd set of barrels and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, all they needed to do was put a sentence is, you cannot build crud barrels if nobody can gain some. But instead they had this, like, paragraph-long description, and I was just confused by it. So, overall, it was pretty good, but there were just a couple hiccups here and there.
But you also mentioned to me earlier, this is also a game that was one of the most difficult to teach.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was probably one of the longest teaches that I had to do, and that's because there's so many different little caveats for everything. Especially when you improve an area, and you can take a landscape tile or an epoch tile.
Epoch tile. Yeah.
It's like, okay, you can improve this area. You can take an epoch tile from that same region. If there is none there of the current epoch value, then you can take another one of an earlier epoch from another area. But you only score points if you actually took it from that area. And it's just...
And some of the locations are edge locations. So you're like, is that in this area or that area? So then when you're planning ahead, sometimes it was more confusing trying to figure out when you're planning, okay, I'll go there because this is going to be part of that area, I think. Because there's a few of those edge cases that you had. I think I totally agree with you. And for me, part of the learning curve here was then this touches on my main issue I have with this game. Is we're going to get back to it in different points throughout the review, it's niggly. It's there's these edge cases. There's these things where you're trying to plan and get everything working together, and you're like, oh yeah, but then there's this or this thing to consider. And I think that it makes the game feel heavy, and so that's why a lot of people feel that this game is heavy. Well, I don't think so. Like, it's not heavy for strategic reasons. It's heavy just because it's niggly.
Yeah, I think that all those little caveats, once you know the rules, it's very easy to play. I found it anyways. But those little rules just increase the barrier to entry so much to get someone into this game. But it's not a thing that's going to be present in your 5th play of the game, but that first play of getting someone in, it's like, do I really want to go now and teach somebody else and take another 45 minutes to an hour? Probably not.
Well, and I think I mentioned this in number 4 and after, is those little edge cases and those niggly rules is a reason why I don't see myself playing this game a year from now. Because some of these other games that we pull out that we haven't played in a long time, you pull it out and it's streamline's not a good word to use for it, but
elegant.
I don't like using those types of words, but you pick it up, it's intuitive, it makes sense, and it's consistent. And then I look at this, I'm like, it's a steep learning curve to pick it back up again if we don't play for a while.
Like one other quick example is when you pilfer. Like, you move around the board and you can pilfer, but wait, you can't pilfer from a farm that you rule. So that's another little edge case there. And then there's like the rule that when you improve a location, if you're improving a farm to a city, then all the goods that are next to that farm go away. Like, it's like these simple things of pay a resource, improve, score points becomes so much with regards to the epoch tiles with, is this a farm going to a city? I need to remove that. All these little things. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
So let's move on to thematic immersion and integration.
That's right. So did you feel like you were part of this kingdom, Queen Anne's kingdom?
A little bit yes and a little bit no.
Okay.
I think the map component of the game, especially, like, the board is big, but I think it's even bigger given the fact that to travel to different locations, you need different types of vehicles. So the map has a scale beyond just its physical size.
Well, there's dimensionality to it. You can go underwater, over land, and so it kind of made it feel three-dimensional. You weren't just on one plane.
So I felt like I was moving around the land. I felt like I was improving different locations. Where it kind of fell flat for me was the guilds itself.
Right.
I didn't really care which guild I was the master of. To me, it was just 5 victory points for pushing something over. So I didn't feel like, yeah, I'm the master of the Merchant Guild or the Knight Guild. It just kind of was like, okay, I'm pushing to get points.
And I completely agree with me. And that, for me, the guild is one of these choke points in the game for me for gameplay reasons, but as well as for thematic immersion. Because there's times I completely agree with you where you're like, well, I'll just go there and I'll get some points and I'll push this over. I don't really care from a gameplay point of view. Sometimes I didn't care, and especially near the end of the game. We'll talk about this later in terms of scalability. Yeah. I found in lower player counts that, like, oh, there's an empty guild. I'll just jump over there and it'll get me some points. And then similarly, for when we were doing the epoch scorings where you had the different locations that score. So sometimes I found like, okay, I'll just go over there because that'll give me an extra location. It's an easy place to go. And so when I have those senses, that feeling, I don't feel immersed into a game at all. I feel that I'm playing a game. I'm definitely playing, but I'm not immersed into that world.
Yeah, there was so many times where I was doing things just for victory points, and that pulls you out.
That's right.
That pulls you out of the game.
But let's not all be doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I like the getting drunk. Yeah, actually, yeah. I thought it was kind of neat that you could actually use your sulfur and put it in a wine barrel, as a preservative.
Well, and that speaks to the thematic integration.
That's right. Yeah.
You can just give someone a bottle of booze and
throw a party and then use his action and then get additional points. So I found that there was some things that were interesting, like even the food. You could either use wine or actually get food that was harvested. Yeah. So I thought they did a good job there. But yeah, in terms of actually the integration of the mechanics, like the monsters, let's talk about them. I didn't. Maybe this is this whimsical world with monsters, and so maybe it's a me problem. I just didn't get what I was supposed to be immersed into in the first place.
Yeah, I felt there were things that were thematically integrated into the mechanisms, and I felt like the things that weren't. Monsters being one of the things that I didn't feel like, how am I controlling this monster? This monster's going over here and attacking this farm and taking a wood. How do I get that wood to use? I don't think that would be a real salvageable piece of wood after a monster was done.
Manhandling it.
Manhandling it. But then there's other things like, you need to feed the people that are out there. The whole thing that I mentioned, like the farm when it upgrades to the city. Okay, you lose all those resources that are out there. But, I mean, what kind of farm is it if you have, like, sulfur and food and wood and of saltpeter? I mean, it's a pretty diverse farm that's there.
Right. So in this case, farm's not really the right word. It's like there's these industries here that are providing these resources, but instead it's a farm, and then you're harvesting it.
Yeah. So I found there was a mix of things that were, like, you could see how the mechanisms were changed to integrate with the theme, and then other instances where I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right. And I like the pawns. I thought that was kind of cool because each pawn in the advanced game comes with a special ability that you can use. Yeah. And I found, generally speaking, a lot of those special abilities made sense. Like, for example, the monk could move one additional space, because he's out, preaching, and so that makes sense. You have the merchant who can buy himself to be the most influential, so that he could be, okay, that makes sense. You get the knight that you can pull back some extra influence because, sometimes brawn is, that's quite mighty. So I thought that they did a really good job with actually the pawns and your choices you had to make with the pawns as well for how these guys were going to move about the board. I thought that was well done.
Yeah. So let's jump into the gameplay.
Okay.
Now this, we broke this kind of down into sections of like different types of mechanisms and things in the game. This game has so many. Like, as I was adding more and more things, I was like, normally I have like 4 or 5. I think we have 8 or 9 potential.
There's a few. Yeah, I think 8 or 9. You're right.
So there's a lot.
Yes.
A lot of different things going on in this game. And the first one that we kind of touched on at the beginning was the action card selection and activation. This is one place where you are not a super fan.
I think this is one point that you and I disagree a lot on the actual gameplay as well. So do you want to start with the negative?
Let's start with the negative.
Okay, we'll start with the negative. I don't like it. I absolutely do not like it. This simultaneous action selection, or where everyone has their 11 cards, and you choose your 4 cards, and now you're locked in for the rest of the game. For a game like this, of this scale, what this does is it introduces speculation as something I need to do. And there's already lots of speculation going on. Are you going to attack me? Do I need my defense card? Right. Can I move over here? Can I upgrade this before you upgrade yours and steal that tile, that epoch tile that we're talking about? Or will I be forced to take some other junky one from a different stack of a different landscape?
Yeah, or if I want to attack, do I need to also take take a move card in case you move away before I get a chance to attack you.
Yeah.
Lots of speculation going into that selection.
And the selection and the speculation sometimes comes with a cost. So if I really feel like, oh, you're going to do that, now I'm going to spend a sulfur so I can do 2 actions back to back. So try to leapfrog you so I can take care of that before you screw me over. Or I'm going to spend a saltpeter and add another card. Like it just adds. Selecting your cards beforehand just adds this wrinkle to the game that's not necessary. And there's some things in the game that also occur that are circumstantial. So, for example, if you come to attack me, or say you traveled and you left behind your transport vehicle, so now I can pick it up. And those are types of things that, if I didn't plan 4 moves in advance that you might do that, I can't take advantage of that circumstance. And so for me, again, I said this in before and after, just give me my own board where I can select my actions. I can only select it once, and let me do that, and I can be responsive to what's happening on the board, and then I would enjoy the gameplay a lot more. So for me, there's games where you do cards like things like
card
this.
Selection.
Yeah, like River Dragons is one. Everyone chooses 5 cards, and it's just chaotic, but that's a short, fun game. You got Colt Express where you do something similar. It's more of a hand management, but you only have a few to choose from, and you're putting them into a pile, hoping that things work out well for you. Right. So it's kind of pre-programmed movement is what you're doing. For those types of games, cool. But for a game that's trying to be this monster,
this size,
that's over 4 point something on BGG heaviness scale. Not at all necessary. So this is my least favorite part of the game.
So I also have some quibbles about this.
Okay.
Your point about the simultaneous selection and rather than having a board, I'm not a fan of it either. But I think the reason they did it...
Well, no, but the board would be you choose as you go.
You choose as you go.
Yeah.
The reason why I think they did it all simultaneously is I think they tried to concentrate all the AP for everyone into one phase. So everyone is thinking about their turn all at the same time, rather than if you had a board, okay, I choose this. Okay, now this person's got to choose, do I need to respond to that? And then they have all their options. It's kind of just limiting it. Mm-hmm. So I can see why they did it, but I agree with you. It's a bit too clunky in how you can respond, especially, given how things could drastically change on the board. The other thing about the action card selection that I'm not a huge fan of is, you have 11 action cards, but one of those action cards is 18 actions.
Yeah, the guild action.
That guild action.
Well, actually, 19 if you count, because I believe that's also throw the feast underneath as well, right? Yeah. So you could even throw a feast. Oh, and sorry, I'm going to hijack you real quick. That's another circumstantial thing, because to throw a feast, you have to be in the same location as either the feudum or the pawn of the guild guy that you're going to copy. I don't know where that's another thing I'm speculating on, but sorry, I hijacked your conversation. Another circumstantial thing, but go ahead.
But I think some of the cards are so linear in what they can do, like the Explore. Okay, I pick up a couple Royal Rick cards, but that guild action is just too much, I think, concentrated into that one card.
Right.
And then there's just, I wish that I could maybe take more guild actions doing different things, but... Well, not a huge fan.
Well, to your point, too, of trying to consolidate the AP, so 5 players or 4 players AP into one session, I get that. But I would rather be annoyed that someone was taking a minute extra on their turn. I can just go to the bathroom and go grab another beer, versus being annoyed that I chose the wrong card and it's now affecting my gameplay. Yeah. I would rather take and I'm never really annoyed if people are playing slow, because I'm the slowest player I know. So I never get upset for that type of thing. I would rather that.
Yeah. But the one thing that I did like about the action cards was, like you were mentioning, depending on the guild dice that you have out there giving you those little special abilities.
Yeah.
I found that really influenced more what guild I wanted to be a part of, more than being actually master of that guild. Because I wanted those bonuses from the cards. I didn't care about the guild and pushing, because you can push from every guild. That's
right. Well, especially even if you throw a feast, you can do that. But anyhow, so that's the action card selection. Hopefully know our views now. So the next thing we have is there's different elements of area control or area influence in this game. So let's start with how you're controlling the guilds themselves.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot of people complain about this, and this as being one of the fiddliest points of the game. Having to recalculate all the time based on, okay, someone upgraded this or put it this dice, and then having to recalculate who has influence over what guilds. we only play 2 and 3 player, and I never found it an issue in any of our games. Just because, like you said, we found that corner. Yeah. Nobody was a part of that guild. I'll just take that one over.
That's right.
But I could see how in higher player counts, that could be something to be keeping an eye on and having to recalculate all the time.
And the one rule that we were constantly reminding ourselves, or you were always reminding me and other players of, was actually how you gain influence within these guilds themselves. This part of the game I really like. I like how this was done, where in order to actually have any influence in the guild, you either have to have a pawn that matches that guild,
or a feudum.
Or a feudum that matches that same guild type. And only then can you be eligible to have influence in there. And once you have one or both of those two things, then if you have locations that are suitable for that guild, each guild has a different location type, then that will also count as an additional influence. I think that's cool. I like how they were using the board and what you're doing out on the board as an ability to influence. On the flip side, it was quite frustrating if you got screwed and you're always like several turns away from getting back in. For example, suppose your pawn gets beaten up. You're lost and your pawn goes away. Now you've just out of that guild and all those locations are gone. So now you got to wait. And going back to those cards. Oh, what? I don't have, what's it called? Migrate? I don't have the migrate action to get them back on there. Ugh. Now I got to wait till the next round to get back in there. Or maybe now I've changed my idea. I think it was, I like that bit and how you had to have one of two things before you could start adding other things. I thought that was really neat.
Well, and the other thing I want to mention too, I thought it was pretty cool using what places do I want to upgrade to give me those extra boosts to solidify my place as Guildmaster, because you earn more points in the epoch scoring for that. So that's a place where you could have that player interaction, right? I'm trying to stay ahead of you, or I want to upgrade a bunch to farm so I can take over the Farmers Guild.
That's right.
From you. So there's this area of player interaction with the upgrading action for the guild influence and stuff.
Exactly. Now the other thing too is the influence in the guilds. I think we need to play, although this is our final review, which we'll get to at our final thoughts, is I don't feel it scales well, this area control, area influence in the, we've already mentioned why. Because how often did we ever have you got the guild master and then you got the
journeyman.
The journeyman. But how often do we actually have a journeyman?
Never, because here's the reason why. I could go become a guild master somewhere else. That's 5 points for me. You're getting 5 points for you, so that's net 0. Yeah. I could spend all this work to try and oust you, taking many actions, but guess what? You're still the journeyman. You're still getting 3 points during the epoch scoring.
Well, unless you wipe out any of those 2 controllers to have influence in there, which would wipe me right out. And so then the pull actions was never really taken. And so then here, again, this was a choke point for me because the influence within the guilds, I felt quite limited to what I actually could do. And then if anybody decided to pick on me, then it was like, well, how am I going to respond? I got to wait to get my cards. And again, there's just a delay in response that I didn't like. Yeah. So we got the guilds. How do we control influence on the actual map itself?
One thing that I thought was cool that they did was it's not like a free-for-all. Not everybody can get in on each location. You're limited to 2 people trying to influence an area. I think that cut down on the speculation as well, because if you have one and someone else has one, you don't have to worry about player 3 and player 4 coming in and trying to mess up your plan. So I like that it kind of just limited to little battles here and there for the different locations around the board. And then those areas that you control, they give you benefits for the action cards that you play. The taxation actions, the more cities you have, the more money you're going to get. And the more farmers you have, the more resources you can pull. I really like that, controlling the different areas to get different bonuses from the cards.
And I also really liked the difficult decision it was to how many influence you wanted to put out on any one location, because I found that the influence markers themselves were really limited. And again, depending on who was controlling the guilds, the Alchemist Guild, and then the Knight Guild, I believe it was, where you can either push or pull these influence tokens in there so that they're available for you to trade and pull out. There were several games where I'm like, I have no influence left. I'm like, I dumped 2 guys at that location.
And I didn't need to.
I didn't need to. But then I think the reason why I was doing that, I thought that someone was coming along to starve the people, and then I might have lost them. Yeah. And so Yeah, I thought that was really neat. The actual influence markers to control the board are really limited, and then that what goes back to the actual interaction you have with the guilds, making sure that the guilds are manufacturing more influence.
Things are cycling.
Cycling.
The other thing about the locations too that I liked is it's not just a win-lose. Like, you rule it or you don't rule it. If you rule it, you get a benefit. If you don't. I like the fact that if you don't rule it, you could be a serf. And in order to put those landscape tiles, you needed to be a serf to do that. So you still get a benefit either way. It's just a different kind of benefit.
Here's another important distinction between a serf and a servant.
Yes.
One of those other little niggly things, because if you're actually owning it and you got a servant, that's not the same as having a serf.
Exactly.
And so then there's different rules that apply. So we talked about those, and we already talked about the pushing and pulling for the guilds. Is there anything else you'd like to add for that?
I think the thing that I just wanted to reiterate is it just felt very point-based.
Yep.
I did not feel like immersed or excited about what I was doing gameplay-wise. Mm-hmm. There were a couple, especially like you mentioned, that influence. Okay, I need to push this over here so that then next time I take a guild action, I can buy more influence. Mm-hmm. But there were ones like pushing the rosary beads. I don't care.
Yeah.
Or pushing over the royal seals to become rosary beads. I don't care. And the other thing about those is when you push certain things, you can tell how many victory points you're going to get, like beforehand.
Yep.
But with pushing those rosary beads and the royal seals, it's variable based on maybe what you're gonna flip over.
Yeah.
So it isn't as known.
That's correct. And the other thing about the pushing and pulling, again, I felt that I didn't feel that it really scaled all that well. And it goes also back to if you're talking about these different guilds, sometimes it's important for gameplay, for example, the influence markers, and other times you don't really care. Well, so then these times where you're waiting for someone in that guild to do something so you can, like, for example, maybe even the farmer needs to push over some food so you can buy it at the merchant guild. If you have a dud there that's not doing anything, who's actually got control of that, then again, now I'll go throw a feast so I can actually take advantage of that. But now I got to go hunt that person down on the map to do so. So it became another circumstantial thing.
If you want to do something yourself that facilitates gameplay potentially, you might have to take 2 actions, but you kind of want people to be doing their jobs so that you can take advantage of it. And I think this will come up later, but this is another area where the game kind of assumes player interaction or different players taking different actions during the game.
Yeah, like there needs to be instructions on how to play the game, not just the mechanics of the game, because we found that lots of times there's choke points here in the pushing and pulling of the guilds.
So I think my favorite aspect of this game is acquiring resources and spending resources. Mm-hmm. There's multiple ways to gain them, and there's multiple things that you want to spend them for.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love how it gives me the variety. Okay, how do I want to feed? Do I want to get sulfur to turn into wine to feed them? Do I want to go with food? How am I going to get that food? Am I going to go around just pilfering stuff? Am I going to make a landscape that's going to give me food? Am I going to go to the guild and buy it?
Or can I use my epoch tile?
As a free resource?
Yeah, and that might be a good way to use it if you don't have serfs out to actually put the landscape down.
Yeah. So, hands down, my favorite aspect of the game.
Well, and I really like too how food is such a big driver in the game. I think the first game that I played with this I didn't have any food, and so my gameplay really suffered. So the fact that you can get food in such a variety of ways, it facilitates a variety of different strategies, because then you can start doing things. If you're money rich, maybe you go buy it from the merchant, or if you're controlling those guilds, for example.
Or if you're moving around a lot, maybe you just pick it up here and there.
Yeah, pilfer it, and away you go. Or maybe too, you might want to, if you are moving around and you're not in danger of being beat up, then sulfur is a good way to go, because it's a 2-for-1 essentially.
Yeah, you get 2 rounds out of 1 resource.
And again, this is where I like the thematic immersion. Going back to that, was if you drink a little wine, well, now you're inebriated and you can't defend yourself. So I thought that was pretty cool. I also like how all the resources can be used in multiple different ways as well. So like the king seals, you can upgrade to a feudum, or you can use it for your royal writ.
Yeah, so for in-game scoring points.
In-game scoring, the sulfur food, back-to-back actions.
And and the
throw
the feast, or feed your people. That way, the saltpeter to take an extra action card when you're selecting, or to increase the attack of your different pawns.
So why does saltpeter increase? I don't know enough about saltpeter.
Isn't that what used to make gunpowder?
Oh, is that what they use?
Yeah.
Oh, well, look at that. I'm learning something here.
Do not quote me on that.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So moving on from there, then we've touched on this, is then each location can be upgraded as well, which we can do with these resources.
So this is what you're going to be using those resources to potentially do. I liked that aspect. Again, going back into the different bonuses for the action cards that you're going to be selecting. The kind of thing that I think fell down was that very last upgrade.
Yep.
To a Feudum.
Yes, now we're getting to the heart of the topic here. So let's talk about doing a final upgrade into a Feudum.
Yeah, so you need to, again, this is one of these things where, okay, you need a royal seal. There's a couple different ways you get it, but you got to usually go to the guild to buy one.
Right, or you might have defended yourself against a few
very situational.
Yeah, again, the circumstantial stuff that you got to do.
But then you get this Feudum. Really helps you out with the guilds.
Yes.
You get 3 influence for a Feudum, whereas you just get one for that pawn. Yeah. So it could potentially bring in a lot of epoch scoring tiles. But the negative thing about it is you got this military track. And if at certain points of the game, if you haven't done some military actions, then you're going to be losing points if you have a Feudum. And I can see what the game was kind of going for. It wanted to, I think, encourage player interaction through attacking with the Feudums. But what I found it did was it discouraged Feudums.
Yes.
It didn't encourage player interaction because I got to plan for so much more. I got to get saltpeter. I got to make sure I can beat you. I got to make sure that I am where your pawn is. All these different things. And I got to go get the royal seals in order to upgrade it to a Feudum. So many things that go into it that I was just discouraged from actually making the thing that the game is named after.
Yeah, and on this, if you start going down the Feudum route, well, then now you're broadcasting that you are on the battlefront. And I do like the fact that the battles can be confrontational, and the fact that you are actually have an attack value and a defense value. And I also like how you can move up this track just by starving the people. Like a little more of a passive type battle. Yeah. I like that. So as soon as you go and you say, now I need to go and start kicking butt all over the place. And then now it goes back to like, okay, now you've broadcast to me that's what you're going to do. I'll start choosing my defense card to stop you. But if no one's broadcasting that that's what they're going to do, well, then now I don't choose my defense card anymore.
Well, yeah, it makes like 2 of your 11 cards kind of not a decision point in the game. Okay, I don't need to defend. Nobody's attacking or making a Feudum. I'm not going to attack myself because I gotta make sure I'm in the right place and have all the resources set up to do it. So then those 2 out of my 11 cards are kind of out of the pool of what I'm selecting for. So it makes less interesting decisions.
And let's be honest with you, if you don't use that defense card, you get 1 point. Big hairy deal.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't have been a deciding factor in any of our games.
And then the other thing that discourages those Feudums too is you got 3 discs that you can place out for different things. You can put them out when you're pushing and pulling with guilds to get extra points, up to 2 extra points, and you can use another one on the epic journey track.
Yeah.
If you're fighting, those discs go into the military track.
Yeah.
So you're losing out on points for pushing and pulling and doing potentially that epic journey.
Right.
So there's such a cost involved with doing Feudums, and you can't really, like, say the last round of the game, be like, oh, I want to make a Feudum. No. Okay, no, because you are making a Feudum. Yeah, sure, you might get 5 points by becoming Guildmaster somewhere, but guess what? You're losing 12 points from the military track.
That's right.
So you need to be planning for that from the get-go. So it makes it very rigid in choosing to switch strategies.
Exactly. So for a game that appears to be sandboxy, as soon as you've kind of played the first round, you're locked in on some of these strategies, either locked into the Feudum, or even your wife, the last time we played, she attacked the Epic Journey track.
Yeah.
And right away, each hand, 2 cards are aside, because that'd be move, and double move. And she moved every single turn and still didn't make it to the final points.
Yeah, you don't, like we were talking about, you gotta, if you want to take certain actions, you kind of gotta double up move and then attack, or take 2 guild actions so you can push and then actually trade with that guild. you don't get that many actions in this game. I mean, it says 7 to 10 rounds of 4, potentially 5 action cards. That's like 28 actions.
Yep.
And if you're want to do one thing and got to use 2 whole cards, it hurts.
Well, and then the problem I find is then you're broadcasting what you're doing, and more so than I find in some other games that I enjoy. And so, like I'm with you. Like the game is called Feudum, and that was our least favorite thing by far. Our least favorite thing.
I only made Feudums in one of our games.
Right. So I think we've covered off on several of our other things. So we can go straight to what about the actual Royal Rick cards? Maybe we should talk about those very quickly.
Yeah.
How do you get them, and are they good end game scoring?
Well, like everything else in the game that I think is good, you have multiple ways to get them, right?
Yep.
Pulling as the journeyman, doing the epic journey track.
Yep.
There's actually a card, the Explorer card that you can get them. But I found it very luck based. Mm-hmm. Like, you might be able to draw a lot with that Explorer card. Draw 5 and then get to choose one. But your hand is limited to only ever having 3.
Yes, good. I wanted you to talk about this, because tell us about one of your strategies, Jeffrey.
Well, this, again, is another one of those little niggly rules that I kind of forgot. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I want to try exploiting the outpost and exploring, getting all these different Royal Rick cards, and scoring a bunch of endgame points. And then partway through the game, you were like, hold on, you can only have 3 of those.
At any time. Yeah.
And I was like, well, poop.
So that's why, even all you kids out there, if someone teaches the game, make sure you read the rules yourself, too.
Exactly.
Little public announcement there, yeah.
So, I mean, it's a part of the game, but I didn't really feel like it added. I either got a couple and oh, wow, this card actually worked in perfectly with how I went out. There's 9 points for me, and that could make the difference in who wins or loses.
Well, and I found personally is with the Royal Rick cards, I can see what they're trying to do, and we say this a lot in this review. We see what they're trying to achieve here is by having a hand limit of only 3. Ideally, in my mind, the way it plays out is you pick up some of the Royal Rick cards that actually give you in-game bonuses.
Yeah, that you can play right away.
And they got the seal already printed on them. So okay, great, I can play that card, and it's going to help me out throughout the game. And then I'm going to start transferring my hand into victory points or end-of-game victory, much like any deck builder would, where you say, I'm going to start with helping me outbuild my engine, and then I'm going to start converting cards into victory points. And I can see that's how I feel like they wanted to do this here. But the problem was that I'd pick up 2, I'm like, wow, nothing helps me now. Or I was planning to go do a battle because I wanted to, who knows what. But I was hoping to get some swords or something. Well, I didn't have a really, really efficient way of getting multiple cards to choose from and getting what I wanted. And people might say, well, you need to be more reactionary. But I don't know. I'd end up, I'm like, okay, now I need to go and settle a bunch of places over here, get influence or control of these locations because this thing says I should. I didn't feel that it influenced my game day decisions the way that I like cards or random parts of a game to influence my game decision. I agree. So I found, and then at the end, I believe when we were playing with your wife again, she drew a really fortunate, she got really lucky.
That draw.
And I think that was a difference between first and second, if I recall. So, okay, so I think we covered all the elements.
I think we covered that's most of the gameplay right there.
Right. So then, how do you feel playing the game? What's the pace?
So I feel when you start off this game with a lot of food, you're getting set up, you're not really having to worry, and then that kind of food runs out. Because you want to get your pawns out on the board because that's going to give you the ability to trigger the counting of influence in guilds. Mm-hmm. And then that food runs out, and then the game switches gears and becomes, how am I going to feed all these guys every round? Right. So I find that pace kind of shifts. And then at the end of the game, I find it's just, okay, well, that's 4 victory points, that's 3 victory points. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then it just becomes a point grab.
But where that game shifts gears like you're talking about, though, and we mentioned this, that's also where now you've kind of locked into what you're doing, and now you know how you're going to manipulate the game to get your food, all those different ways to get food. So it is pretty neat that you're kind of taken care of while you're figuring out which direction you're going to go, and then you've locked into a system that hopefully will work for you. I totally agree with you. I found the end of the game, especially with lower player counts, was just an exercise in max minning things, and so I didn't like the end game. I like games that kind of push into the end, whereas I found that this game starts with a big surge, like you're talking about. Everyone goes off exploring, and then it just sort of
becomes a point thing.
And that takes us away from all the things we already talked about, thematic immersion, etc. And again, I found that throughout the game, even when you're kind of off on your path, there's these choke points. If people aren't using the guilds and it's circumstantial, I can't go and push that guild, and now I'm trying. And so then you're sitting there like, well, I want to do this, but I'm 3 turns away, and that quite possibly might be the end of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to max in some points.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that your decisions come down to, I could take 3 turns to try and set up this. It may or may not work out, or I could just go for the sure thing.
That's right.
Right now. Let's talk a little bit about luck and random elements, especially when we're talking about a Euro. We want to kind of look at, well, is there luck involved? What's the randomness? So during the gameplay, you have the harvesting when you're pulling them out of the bag and putting them on your farm. If you kind of take some of those as favors, they're random. But you can't mitigate that by having actually a farmer die. Then you get to choose. So there's luck, but if you can invest, then you get your choice of it.
Well, and you also can choose from a bigger pile of stuff. If you get the rosary beads, if you pull those, because then that allows you to pick the same number that's on the rosary bead. And then that's another way you can actually get a royal favor, or the symbol there. The seal to flip it over. So you can actually get a bigger quantity to choose from. And I like how they also did, they got a little chart for that as well, saying if you draw 7, then 4 must go here and 3. They have it broken down.
Well, and that's another good thing on how the game plays is that chart is printed right on the card instead of being in the rule book.
Exactly.
You don't have to have the rule book open for that. The rosary beads, when you buy them, the lowest and the highest get taken, and someone randomizes them and you choose a hand. Yeah. I don't like that.
No. I fully agree. I don't know if we even need to go into that, to be honest with you. No. It's just I spent the same amount of money to get this. I don't get any other discount, and boom, that is not what I want.
And then it's the same thing with pushing and pulling those rosary beads. Highest, lowest. Okay, that goes over on the chickens.
Yeah.
And then you get points based on the total number that are there. So another luck element when that same amount of luck isn't present in other guilds. When I go to the Merchant Guild, I know what I'm buying.
Yep.
When I go to the Monk Guild, I don't know.
Exactly. And what about, do you like randomness in a game that accelerates the gameplay? So here we have the epoch, when you roll the dice, right?
Yeah.
And that sometimes switches epochs on you because it takes out the last landscape tile. How do you feel about that? Because sometimes that accelerated the end game. It ended it a full round early.
Yeah, or it accelerates the epoch scoring. You're like, okay, I have plans to oust you in the guild next round. I set all this kind of stuff up. Oh, wait, the epoch tile rolled. We actually go into the epoch scoring now.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, there's a 50-50 chance. I mean, I understand that it's there to keep the game progressing because if people don't upgrade, well, the game could kind of just come to a halt.
Yeah.
So it's there to just keep it going. But it's just another random element that I can't plan for. Or is the game going to end this round? Or is it going to end next round? That could change hugely what cards I'm going to select. How am I going to play this? Don't really like it.
Well, I have a first for you though, Jeffrey. Is I actually wish there was a component of this game that had more randomness put into it. I know.
Oh yeah.
The battles. The battles for me, the fighting, it was extremely unsatisfying. There's nothing it's basically you go, you pick up your guys, you say, okay, well this guy's got a power 2, 2, 1, 1, da, da, da. This guy's this. Okay, I can't attack you because I would lose.
Yeah.
So I'll go over there. That guy, okay. Or maybe I'll attack this guild. I mean the pawn first, and then I'll attack. And so. Give me some dice or give me something, some elements of military battles that go on there. But instead I found that was just such a flat part of the game.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, so there is an unknown element. It is deterministic. The unknown is, did your opponent play a defend card?
Sure.
But then the thing that I found was very unsatisfying about that is, if I plan all this stuff to be attacked, okay, I got a knight, I got all this salt.
I got my monster.
I got 2 saltpeter because I have a knight. I could play that extra, or I had this extra card that I could play. Okay, I got just enough that I could make this successful, and I had to use a move card to get everything set in place, play the attack card, and then all this is done, and the person's like, I defend, and you're like, that's 2 of my actions wasted. I get nothing now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, circumstantial. And for me, this is a part of the game. Like any game, military or combat game, usually has some of that randomness in because you don't know you're on the battlefield. Different things can happen. And this is the one game where there's all this randomness that I don't like, and there's actually a place that I wish there was a little bit of an element so that you could plan around. Yeah. Still, so I wish they would have put it in there. And then again, we already talked about the Royal Rick cards as being swingy at the end.
So let's quickly talk about strategy versus tactics. I feel like this game has a bit of both, but I feel it's way more weighted towards tactics. It's about how can I take points away from you and give points to myself. The strategy, I think, comes into, am I going to do Feudums this game or am I not? Because that completely changes the direction I go.
Well, whenever you talk about like playing a game where you're spending most of the time trying to figure out how to snipe points, then it's all tactical to me at that point in time. You're just saying when you're min-maxing for a bulk majority of the game, then for me, that's just a tactical game.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, the only thing that I see strategy-wise is that Feudum, not Feudum.
Correct.
That's the biggest part for me.
And that's a strategy you predetermine before you sit down.
Yeah.
So I don't.
And you can't switch strategies.
That's right.
Like if you kind of commit to Feudums and you've done all this attacking, you better go for Feudums because otherwise all that attacking didn't get you very many points and you've wasted your disc.
Exactly.
There. So the other thing that we want to touch on is player interaction. We talked about the size of the map and the scale of the map. At the player camps where we played, like 2 and 3, you could either have people who just choose to be in each other's faces all the time, or you could find your own corner. I take these 2 guilds, you take those 2 guilds, you take those 2 guilds.
And whoever does it best will win.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like there's nothing... Like, the game assumes a lot of player interaction, but there's nothing there to tighten it up to make sure it happens. Yeah. Like I mentioned, the Feudums trying to encourage that fighting to be around each other. Like, it assumes that that's how you're going to play. The controlling the different areas to kind of give you those extra influence in the guilds. It assumes that you're fighting over Guildmaster all the time, but we just... This is my corner, that's your corner.
Well, there's that one game that you played. You built yourself, I think it was a boat. And you just went for a nice little boat ride from island to island over on the side. And you were just happy over there.
Well, and then just quickly going back, like, if I'm that far away, how many turns is that going to take for you to actually come over and interact with me?
Right. And then sometimes then I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, well, fine. Maybe I could try to fly over there because then that was what your wife did too. Then she just bought the flying machine, flew over into the mountains, and I'm like, okay, well, how do I get there? And so I was kind of in between. So she ended up being in the mountains. I was kind of central, and you were just boating around, having a good old time. So yeah, I just didn't feel that. The player interaction. I guess it's really group dependent, really, as to how you want to play. And we played the one game where you forced yourself to be up in my face all the time.
And I found I enjoyed that game more.
Yeah.
Because I felt like, we were really interacting. But it had to be a me decision.
Yeah, you made that decision.
But I could have easily have just gone and done my own thing. And then I lose out on some of those aspects of the game. Like the attack cards, like the defend cards for that.
Yeah, and so it'd be nice if the game actually provided you with this is what you need to do. Like your back is against the wall and now you have some real decisions. Yeah. Because, you can just run away and play nice if you want.
Going into variability of the game, what's gonna change the landscape from game to game? There's not a whole lot. The locations are semi-random, but there's starting locations which are always the same. They get randomly put out, though, and then the other locations get randomly put out. But you only have 3 different types. So It's not like... I never found like a huge... like, oh my goodness, I can't believe the outpost is here.
Yeah, that's crazy. This changes everything.
Yeah, this changes my strategy. The starting vehicles for the Alchemist Guild. There's only 3 different types, but usually you just... Oh, that's available. I'll pick that one, and then I'll fly off and go... Go over here. And then there's a random distribution of resources at the beginning of the game and during each epoch. But again, doesn't really impact gameplay that much. You're kind of just... They're opportunity resources more than anything else.
Yeah, and I found that the variability of the actual gameplay itself was actually a small... a distant second behind the actual other randomness that occurred that we already talked about, like with the Royal Writ cards and what you're drawing, like all the random sections. So
and if players aren't interacting with each other, the amount of variability in the game is almost nothing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't care which guild I'm the guild master of, so I just pick my 2 and then or 3 potentially, and then I just use those to get points. And but when you're interacting, I can see, okay, it's about the tactics and then the variability becomes in, can I get the 1-up on my opponent, and then that changes things. But when you kind of just go off and do your own thing, each game feels very similar.
Right. So then, what's the replayability like there, Jeffrey?
Not a whole lot for me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I like carving out a strategy. Like I mentioned, I tried to do this Royal Writ card. One game I tried to do the Feudums. One time I tried to do the Epic Journey track, and I try to find something and really exploit it. Mm-hmm. But in this game, I didn't feel like I could really do that, and I felt like because I was off on my own, it played it very samey.
Right, and I found for me that at first blush, when you look at this board, you were like, wow, there's so much going on. This game's going to have tons of replayability.
Well, like in our after segment, we were just like, oh, like there's stuff we didn't even look at.
Kids at a candy store we were. And now I'm kids after the candy store, after eating all the candy, I'm kind of like, ugh. Because for me, there's very little replayability, and I have zero desire to play this game again because the choke points are always there. Yeah. And so then I found, despite on the surface all these different cool things that you might be able to do, is the choke points always kind of remained the same for me that we've already talked about, and then that just made the game feel the same. Yeah. So player count.
So like I mentioned a couple times, we played it 2 and 3 player. I preferred the 3 player more because again, I think the game needs player interaction. Mm-hmm. BGG says the 4 player is best, and I could definitely see why that would be the case. So many of your actions are dependent on interacting with other players, and when you don't interact, you're losing parts of the game.
Correct.
I definitely preferred the more players.
And why don't you finish off on how long it took us to play, and then let's get into your closing remarks.
All right, so playtime, it's advertised as 1 hour, 20 minutes to 3 hours. Our experience was about 1 hour and 46 minutes, so we're right in that area. I found the playtime did drop drastically the more we played it. Our last game was 3 player, was just slightly over an hour.
It was like 1 hour and 8 minutes or something, if I recall.
Yeah. And again, that could be dependent on, we really pushed the end of the game by doing a lot of upgrading. Yeah. But I think it played in a reasonable amount of time and as advertised.
Well, and the reason why we're doing all that upgrading, because we were min-maxing points on each turn to get those points for the upgrade. Yeah. And that's what drove the game so fast.
Yeah. So on to our final thoughts and rating.
Okay.
For this game. So, for me, I appreciate what the designer was trying to accomplish with this game. And I actually look forward to his future designs because I like the direction he took with the game with regards to the variety of ways to gather and spend different resources and how the different gears of the game interlock. Unfortunately, Feudum comes up as a miss for me. What I feel like is the intended gameplay of an intricate dance between players, where you should be reacting to your opponents each and every move, fails because the dance floor is just too big. It assumes player interaction in many of its mechanisms, but does nothing to ensure the need for that interaction, especially at the low player counts. I feel Feudum lacks a certain degree of focus, which causes the sum of its parts to actually be less than those parts. So for this reason, I'm giving it a 2 out of 6. One thing that putting together this review brought to my mind is that Feudum has all the ingredients, but when it fell flat for me, it gave me a good opportunity to really examine that it's not just having the ingredients that make me fall in love with a game, but how the recipe is put together.
So 2 out of 6.
2 out of 6.
And if I was to sum that up, it's like a junior high school dance. Boys on this side and girls on this side, and the interaction is not being forced.
Just not there.
Okay, so let's see if I think any differently.
Let's see.
So, in my many years on BGG, I've seen threads and asked that ask questions like, if you were deserted on an island, what game or games would you take with you? Or if you could only have 10 games in your collection for the rest of eternity, what games would they be? And often the responses are filled with people's top 10 lists or thematically relevant games. For example, taking Robinson Crusoe when you're stranded on an island, for example. However, for me, Feudum would indeed be one of these games that I would take with me if I was deserted on an island for the rest of my life. Feudum is a game with great vision. I applaud the designer Mark Swanson for the scope of the game he has tried to achieve. There are so many great interlocking ideas and concepts packaged within this game, but unfortunately, the gears of this game grind together, or sometimes do not even seem to contact each other at all, depending on how the game is played. During my initial plays of Feudum, I kept giving the game the benefit of the doubt, telling myself that I just need to play a little differently, or next time I just need to focus on this or focus on that a little better. But I've discovered that these concepts and ideas simply do not mesh for my style of play. Maybe I'm the minority here. I see many people still are willing this game to be great. Maybe it is. There are certainly a lot of great ideas here, but there would also be a lot of great ideas if you were to put Einstein and Charles Darwin in the same room together. Does not mean that the world should expect to get some magnificent theory of evolution by general relativity, for example. Right. So why would I take Feudum with me as one of the few games I could choose to take to a deserted island with me for the rest of my life? The ingredients are here to provide an amazing game. And for me, I'd enjoy the challenge on working and developing them over the many years I was stranded. I could even name the monster Wilson. I give Feudum 2 out of 6 stars, which could be bumped to 3 stars should I ever use the box to protect myself from a torrential rain. Mark Swanson, a designer with great vision, who I will eagerly follow, and I look forward to seeing what he comes up with next. With the right development team, a patient publisher, and rigorous play testing, I believe he'll make some amazing games in the future.
I agree.
There you have it.
There you are. So that's our review of Feudum. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe. Let us know your comments.
We might get a few.
We might get a few. The other thing also, we have a podcast that we host.
That's right.
The Pip. Mm-hmm. So you can go to iTunes and find us there and give us a listen.
The podcast where we touch pips and look each other in the eye to talk about it later.
And till next time, we'll see you then.
Cheers.